Welcome, I'm Kent Davy. This is a special edition of KOCT's North Country Roundtable, Meet the City. The personal in-depth look at Oceanside's City Council. I'm joined now by District 1 Representative Kori Jensen. Welcome very much.
It's a pleasure to be here.
For those of us who may not know you well, can you tell us a little bit about your own story? Who are you? Where's your family from?
My mother's parents were immigrants from Mexico. They came to Oceanside in the 1940s. My grandfather was in the commercial laundry business, and when Camp Pendleton opened, Oceanside was lacking a linen supply commercial laundry, so he realized that and came and opened the first one in Oceanside to service Camp Pendleton, and that's how we ended up in Oceanside.
Is it still in business?
No, unfortunately my grandfather passed away pretty young. He had prostate cancer, and he sold, when he became ill, sold to Mission Linen Supply. And Mission is a family-owned laundry, commercial laundry that we have here in Oceanside and have had for many years. I think is the only family-owned commercial laundry left.
Then you grew up in Oceanside?
Yes, my early childhood was spent in Oceanside. Both my parents graduated from Oceanside High, and my father's family came from Minnesota, and hence the Scandinavian Mexican mix. And they opened a bakery called the Scandia Bakery, which was pretty well known on Mission Avenue.
Okay.
I went to South Oceanside kindergarten and elementary school. We lived in a house my grandmother owned on the corner of Tremont and Whaley in South Oceanside. And so I was able to walk to school at a young age. And Oceanside was a pretty sleepy little beach town at that time. You
told me off camera that your father was a professor as well?
Yes, a tenured professor. He's retired now from Whitman College in Walla Walla, Washington. He coached football and women's track, and he actually had a national championship women's skiing team.
Very nice, very nice. And your own work history, personal history?
I've been working in real estate. When the economic downturn happened in the about 2008, 2009, real estate really became a foreclosure market, and I didn't really want to, do that. So I went back to school and became an alcohol and drug counselor. There was the opioid epidemic had, really come full swing. Unfortunately, I had lost the love of my life to an accidental drug overdose. It was an iatrogenic addiction, pain medication prescribed by a doctor, and he became addicted and subsequently passed away.
And you have children?
I have 2 grown sons.
And where are they?
One is in Reno, and one is right here in North County, and he also works in alcohol and drug treatment. He does house operations and logistics for an Orange County company.
I see. In doing alcohol rehab and treatment work poses an interesting question, since that's one of the problems that almost all the Southern California cities have to face. Where do you think the solutions might lie for those kinds of problems? And what do you think of the way Oceanside has handled those things so far?
I think Oceanside has done an excellent job. I think in the last 5 years, things have escalated. But prior to that, we had Bread of Life and Brother Benno's and a lot of solution-oriented programs that were, able to deal with the homelessness issue pretty well, I think. In the last 5 years, though, it seems to have really escalated. And I don't know if the opioid epidemic had a lot to do with that. But we do have a large population of homeless that have mental health issues, serious issues like schizophrenia, and issues that put them on the street. I think that families become overwhelmed and can no longer help people, and I think people end up on the street that way.
Do you know if the We Count analysis or search that was done in January. Have those numbers been released yet for this last January?
The homeless count for, I believe, in Oceanside, the last numbers I read were around 600 unhoused Oceanside citizens.
Kind of brings to mind a question. During the Obama administration, the federal government made a choice to say that it wanted to go to a housing first model and say, we're going to put people in housing, put a roof over their head, and then we'll worry about any of the social afflictions that may be drivers of it or may be associated with it. That's caused some problems for people like Chris Megason's Solutions for Change not being able to receive federal dollars because they won't admit anyone who has a drug or alcohol problem, as I understand. How do you see that problem or that policy decision working out here? Is that a good idea, bad idea?
Well, I believe that's based on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that first we have to be in a safe environment before we can focus on other issues. That's a proven theory.
Okay.
So that's the housing first. We need to bring people into shelter and give them safety and security before we can focus on substance abuse issues or mental health issues or anything else that may be going on. And the problem with that, even though it works really well in treatment or in addressing the homeless issue, is we have other populations. We have domestic violence, we have mental health, along with substance abuse. So when we put people under the influence, say with a mother and her children looking for safety, that's a slippery slope, because are we endangering that population by putting them all together? I think there's a need to have a lot of different solutions.
Okay.
And every situation needs to be addressed individually and tailored to meet the needs of that person.
What do you think Oceanside should do now to try and address its problem?
We're taking steps to get the shelter in place, and we still have all of our other services available. And I think our shelter is going to be like a triage location where people can come for safety and then be directed to where they can get, further help.
Okay.
And I think that's an amazing solution because it covers all the bases.
But won't it still fall fairly short of the needed number of beds and resources? For
Oceanside, to have a shelter that's a long-term shelter, yes, it would fall short. But being that we're going to direct these people to larger facilities because they all have different needs, I think that having a 30-day program gives them 30 days to get them placed in larger facilities. They wouldn't necessarily be in Oceanside.
Okay. As you look across the change and the evolution of Oceanside over 30 or 40 years, we've gone from being a military town that was a pretty rough town to one that is starting to show signs of being pretty progressive, kind of a tourist destination with the resorts coming in, with all the downtown development. That creates some interesting kind of dynamics and tension between various groups. What do you see, or how do you analyze that?
I think Oceanside's roots were a tourist destination if we go all the way back in time. It was, the place to be in the summertime. When I was young, we weren't allowed to come downtown because of the bars and the military and how rough it was. So I think bringing back the tourist focus is going to, bring a lot more revenue to the city.
Right.
And it's a slippery slope, and it needs to be, done delicately, because it is a big change for Oceanside. The other cities around us have grown exponentially, Vista, San Marcos, Carlsbad, but Oceanside has been able to maintain its little unique beach town quality that we all love. So it's going to take some thought and care.
Are there limits to what should be built and developed in Oceanside?
I think there's definitely limits, and I think that we need to keep our integrity and maintain who we are. but there's still areas, along the corridor that can be maximized for housing. And I think that we need to be focused on smart growth and not just massive growth.
Mm-hmm. If more developers came in and say, we want to build a string of hotels down the coast all the way to Carlsbad, what would your stomach tell you about that?
I mean, every project has to be looked at individually. So, it's hard to say, I would say no to every single thing that wanted to come in. Mm-hmm. But I think we would have to take a real good look at individual projects as they wanted to come in.
Is there a danger of losing that sense of the beach town we all love as development continues to progress here in the city?
I think as long as we're careful and picky about what we allow to come in and the speed at which things are allowed to come in, I think we can maintain it. In
maintaining Oceanside's role or place as a tourist destination, sand becomes really important. What should be done about issues of trying to keep sand on these beaches?
Sand is a critical issue, and a lot of cities have had the problem that we've had and dealt with them successfully. I think there's a lot of studies and a lot of options, and I think whatever we decide to do, we're going to need to do it quickly.
Okay.
And whether that's jetties or offshore dredging, whatever happens, and maybe a little of all of it.
Is there money available to do that?
There's going to have to be money available, and I think we're going to have to find it.
Okay. In trying to navigate these kinds of issues of homelessness, sand, and others, is there another, or are there other really big issues that you think face Oceanside right now?
I'm going to say those are the big issues right now. I think we've been really lucky coming out of the pandemic, and our businesses have been able to come back fairly swiftly and thrive.
Uh-huh.
So I think we're really lucky there. But I do believe right now the homeless issue, the sand, bringing marijuana into Oceanside is another hot button issue. And so my focus there is going to be to make sure that as much of the tax revenue that we can gain from that new industry goes to prevention and counseling and keeping our kids free of marijuana.
Okay. These issues kind of sit on your table or in your lap in the midst of kind of a tumultuous time, because you've only been on the council for about 4 months,
Correct.
I believe, and are facing, if I can tread towards the elephant in the room, facing a recall issue. Can you talk to us about that problem?
I believe that's just politics as it's happening today with Gavin Newsom recall. There's a lot of council members that are being recalled. I think that's the new trendy thing to do. If you don't like somebody's politics, you launch a recall.
The recall effort has focused on a series of allegations about your residency on Pacific Street and whether or not you in fact live there, because apparently you had used or had been offered as a Airbnb for a while. Can you share with us what basically the specific answers to those assertions are? They've raised an issue of back taxes, and I didn't quite understand. I assume that's TOT taxes or something. And they have now raised the issue of we want to vote. How do you respond to those kinds of assertions?
Well, as far as the residency, the investigation took care of that. So now they've moved on to we want to vote. We don't want the city council appointing representatives in vacant positions. And so I think my advice to them is to attack the city charter and change that ordinance regarding placing somebody or having the council fill a vacancy until an election happens. But you can't just recall every single person that takes a vacant spot on the council because there hasn't been an election yet. So
there have been a whole lot of appointments to this council in recent years.
Right, and I think that's why they get upset. And so I think that they should take that effort and focus on changing that.
Changing that in the city charter.
Yes.
If that's the real underlying issue.
Right, right.
In this case, any sense of what it is about your politics that someone would not like?
I have no, I can't answer that question. I've only been there 4 months and I'm not a professional politician. I'm a realtor and an alcohol and drug counselor. So I can't answer that.
Yeah. I know that, or have read that the whole issue got turned over to the DA's office for a while. They've decided that there is not a chargeable offense there one way or the other. Did the DA's office communicate with you about that decision?
Not directly, no.
Was there something that you were able to provide to them or to anyone that said, okay, this is a non-issue in your mind?
Oh yeah, I gave them a timeline for the last 20 years of my residency with proof of residency, and that was sufficient for them.
And do you know how successful the petition campaign against you has been? Do you have any sense of how much risk there is for you?
I really don't. I am trying not to be distracted by that because, as you said, I've only been on the council for 4 months and we have these huge issues and topics that we're addressing right now. So my time has to be focused on studying and you know, staying on top of everything that's going on.
Okay. Assuming that they are able to trigger a recall election, and you are able to survive that, do you have a sense of what you want to do in 2022?
I do. I would like to focus on affordable housing. Jack Feller and Christopher Rodriguez started a down payment assistance program, or brought it to council in 2019. And I think that we should really focus on that and help our young Oceanside residents become first-time home buyers and open that up. And so that's going to be really important to me.
So you are already setting yourself up to say, yes, I want to stay on the council.
Yes, I do have future.
The trauma of the last 4 months is not sufficient to dissuade you from continuing.
Correct.
Okay, good for you. I know that you have also been involved in supporting of gay rights. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, my firstborn, my older son, is gay. For me, I believe that gay rights are human rights. You know, we shouldn't have a question about human rights in this country, in my opinion. We're all equal. We should all have the same opportunities and the same quality of life.
Another one of the sets of rights discussions that has gone on over the last several years has to do with Black Lives Matter and civil rights, racial justice, social justice generally. Even though you've only been on the council for 4 months, do you have a sense of how Oceanside is positioned vis-a-vis those kinds of social justice issues?
For me, coming from a mixed marriage, my mom being Mexican, new Mexican, because her parents immigrated from Mexico, and my dad being Caucasian, I think that Oceanside has always been a very welcoming community. I don't think that we've had, that I'm aware of, any real racial tension or racial issues that happen throughout the country. I think that Oceanside is really special in that respect.
If there was one thing that you could do for Oceanside as a matter of a magical treatment and say, okay, I've just changed something about Oceanside to make it a better place, what kind of thing would you choose?
I would definitely fix the sand.
Okay.
Because I think the sand affects everyone. It affects our tourism industry. It affects our residents. It's our beaches in Oceanside are what we're famous for. And I think that if I could just wave a magic wand and fix something, that would be the issue I would choose to fix right now.
Okay. With regard to other kinds of recalls, have you thought much about the possibility of a Gavin Newsom recall, and how do you feel about that? I
don't really have an opinion about the recalls. I'm trying to avoid them now that it's kind of been directed at me. So I don't have an opinion.
Do you know if the recall signature campaign is successful against you? Do you know what kind of a campaign you will mount to try and overcome that problem?
I think just like we're doing today, letting people get to know me as a person. I think that it's easy to launch a recall against somebody that nobody knows, and it's easy to say things that aren't true about somebody that nobody knows. And me not being a professional politician, I can understand that a lot of people don't know me.
Doesn't that call into question the idea, why in the world do you want to be on the council?
Well, I feel like now that I'm there and I'm learning, I think that we can do really good things. And I think we can address issues that need to be addressed.
Okay. According to some press accounts, and I've not spoken to anyone directly, you seem to have lost the faith of a couple of your fellow council members. Have you had an opportunity to talk to them directly about this?
About that, no.
Do you think you would?
Probably not. I think it's just politics.
Okay. Coming out of the pandemic and with the number of business closures, and do you have any notion of how many businesses might have been lost in the city of Oceanside?
I don't have an exact number, but we did lose businesses permanently to the pandemic. And we're opening new businesses every day, but at the same time, we did suffer some losses.
Has that washed back into any clear impact on city finances and budget?
I'm going to say that obviously there's probably going to be an impact, but at the same time, opening new businesses every day is going to balance that.
Okay. With regard to the downtown versus South O, particularly Coast Highway, is there a reason for people along South O to look at the downtown District 1 area and go, hey, we're not getting our cut?
I think we've opened a lot of new businesses on Coast Highway in South Oceanside.
Okay.
You know, South Oceanside's near and dear to me because that was always where my grandma was, right there at the corner of Tremont and Whaley on Coast Highway. But I see a lot of businesses opening in South Oceanside, and I think other than, of course, the big hotels, they're doing great with their breweries and their restaurants and their businesses that are opening.
Taking the opportunity to talk to viewers, what kind of a message would you like people in Oceanside to know about you?
I would like the people of Oceanside to know that my primary purpose for going after this position was to help address problems that we've had for a very long time. And once again, I'm not a professional politician, but I watched the homeless issues escalating, and I thought, as an alcohol and drug counselor, I have some insight to that population that would be helpful. And then as far as like the housing crisis, being a realtor, I have some insight to that as well. So and being Mexican American, I thought that I could represent my community very well because it's basically half and half Caucasian, half Hispanic.
Right.
So I felt like everything lined up for me to be helpful.
With regard to the housing crisis, is there any real solution to a housing crisis other than to build more units?
Well, we need to build affordable units, and that's the only way to address the issue. It's the lack of inventory that's causing prices to escalate.
When you say affordable units, you mean that units that fall under the HUD subsidized housing kind of units?
No, just more multifamily, more multifamily projects I think are helpful. We're really deficit in condo projects, so to speak.
Isn't there a tension there when you build a lot of multifamily, though, that also creates an extraordinary demand on the infrastructure that supports it? Roads, sewers, water treatment?
Of course, but I think that we're gearing up to be able to handle that.
What about traffic and congestion-related issues in the city? Do you see particular problems that you think might need to be addressed, say, in the next 5 years?
Yeah, I think we do have some congestion, and I think that, the city and the county are working on those issues. Sandag is doing a lot right now, so I think those issues will definitely be addressed. And then strategically placing our new housing that's coming in to mass transit corridors is going to be very critical.
Is there much land left in Oceanside to build housing on, or is most of this infill?
A lot of it's going to be infill.
Doesn't that work as against any sizable kind of contribution to the number of units because it's piecemeal?
Yeah, it's definitely a difficult situation, and we're going to have to look at all avenues and be strategic in where we place our new housing.
Does the rental moratorium, I guess it is, has that impacted landlords here, and have you heard anything from landlords?
I have not heard a lot from landlords, and we do have programs in place that would subsidize landlords up to 80% of their lost rental when the tenants can't pay, and they allow them to stay in the unit, because we did have a moratorium on evictions.
Right.
So, but I have not seen, a lot of landlords coming and applying for that program, which would be great.
Any last words for our audience as we wrap this up?
I just hope that everybody gives me a chance, and I've only been here 4 months, and I'm focused on Oceanside. I love Oceanside. It's my heart, and I hope everybody can just give me a chance.
Well, thank you very much for coming in and talking with us. Wish you well.
Thank you so much.
You're watching KOCT Television in Oceanside.